Hello, hello. I'm Sarah, and yeah. um, so today is the 1st of October, and my mom's birthday is in October. So I decided maybe it was time for me to tell the story of how she died. Um, oh, I should probably put in my sound. Yeah, I just got home and blah, blah, blah. Let's plug that in. Better now. Let's hope. Oh my God. So I'm a hot mess. If you like my content, click the buttons. Follow, subscribe, like, comment, blah, 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 share, do the things. All right. Yeah. So my mom had a lot of health problems for a long time. Asthma being a big one that she dealt with on a regular basis. Ever since I was fairly young, I remember her having severe migraines, asthma attacks. She went into menopause in her like early mid 30s, I think. Leading up to that, she just had a lot of overall health problems, and health in the cult was not taken care of very well, as some of my other stories have relayed. Anyways, when I was about 14, just shy of 14 or just turned 14, right around there, there was this one morning that my mom had six convulsions in the morning. She lost control of her body. She was flailing about, and my stepdad called the ambulance, which was unheard of in the cult. Um, as the ambulance was loading her into the back, the leadership of our commune was demanding that she tell them what she was possessed by, what demon, what was the name of the demon possessing her. And my mom said that she was afraid. So they decided it was the demon of fear. I We shared rooms with other young people close to our age, and they gathered me and my younger siblings that were living with mom at the time, and along with all the other young people in our age group. They did not pull us aside separately. They told all of us at the same time, including all our friends, that our mother was possessed by the demon of fear, and she also had lost faith since she had chosen to go to the hospital. So that is how I was informed about what happened to my mother that morning. I don't really recall exactly what time she got back home because we often didn't spend time with our parents in that way, even though we lived in the home together. But when she did return, they performed an exorcism on her. Um, yeah. So I believe there may have been a couple or so, but yeah. My stepdad, however, he pushed for her to have some screenings done, and he convinced doctors to donate their time and use of equipment. He raised money in order to pay for what could not be donated, and he had some, like a CAT scan or something. And this was Brazil about 25 or so years ago. No, 27 years ago. So technology was not quite what it is today, and definitely not in Brazil. And the doctors there noticed a growth behind the eyes. My understanding was it was described as a small growth behind the eyes, potentially cancer. Um, and so my mom was having some severe memory loss problems. She was very forgetful, like to an extreme extent. She had a day where she forgot that she had children, much less eight of them, seven girls and a boy who passed away. Um, she was not herself. So she decided that she was going to get medical treatment, proper medical treatment. She didn't want to. experience more exorcisms, she wanted to actually see doctors. And she wanted to do that back home with her family. So, neighbor of ours was, we called him the General, the general. He was a retired, I believe, four-star general, and he lived next door to us at one of our communes. And he had a liking for my mom in a platonic way. And she did a lot of cooking, and he had a little, like, farm of sorts where he planted a bunch of stuff. He bought a big plot of land and wanted to be a gardener and planted a bunch of vegetables and such, and we would help him harvest and he would donate. So he gave her the money for her to come to the US. However, the commune took that money and said if God wanted her to get medical care, he would have provided a way, which I would argue he already had. But they confiscated that money. I'm assuming they were probably behind on bills or something like that, and that's why. Or just trying to make things more difficult for her. I know that my mom wanted to take the younger sisters along with her, especially the youngest, but she was convinced to leave them in the cult. And so my grandma paid for her to come to the States. And it's a very expensive thing to travel internationally. If you have not looked up a ticket to Brazil, it's definitely over $1,000 even back then, probably quite a bit more now. And Grandma paid that for her and set up multiple appointments for her to go in and get medical treatment once she arrived. Well, when she arrived in the States, um, I was no longer living at the place. We were living in Salvador at the time, and um, once it took a few months for her to leave because that took a little while to get that money together. Um, so all of us girls, Dad showed up one day and said we were all going to travel to Brasilia to say goodbye and see her off, which we did back in the day when you could go meet the airplanes and see them leave. So we did do that and said goodbye. And in the cult, it was typical when someone left, especially leaving for medical care or to do something that was against the rules within the cult, you were shunned. People would talk about you like you were weak, like you just made really bad choices and that you were not following God's plan. So the conversation surrounding Mom after over 20 years of her life being devoted to this cause were not kind or pleasant. And being said that she was gone was viewed very negatively and strongly discouraged. So, yeah, you kind of had to buck up and just deal. So my mom came to the States and she stayed with her mother. And she went in and they redid the scans. And it wasn't a small growth behind her eyes. It was about the size of an orange, cobwebbed throughout her brain. So having brain surgery to fully remove this tumor was impossible. But they could remove portions of it. So she had, I believe, two, maybe three open brain surgeries. I was 14, 15 when she was going through treatment, and I was still in Brazil. So my clarity on exactly everything that occurred, I would not be the one to know all the details. But she did have open brain surgery. She also went through chemo and lost quite a bit of her hair. Um, the they were able to shrink it and she went into remission. Um, the doctor said at the size of it and the rate that it was growing, she likely had this tumor growing for approximately 8 years. So a lot of the health issues that she had that I remembered as a child were likely occurring for quite some time. And it actually was connected to a brain tumor, not demons or doubts or God's punishment. She was actually ill. And while she was in the States, she went through a phase where she forgot how to speak English because her brain was affected. She would have trouble communicating. I could tell that her brain was not functioning as well as it should when she sent me a card that started with Dear Sarah and ended with Love Sarah instead of Love Mom. Or Mommy. She would always sign Mommy. She had beautiful penmanship, and you could notice that the penmanship was kind of halted, where she would pause. She did struggle with a lot of memory problems because it was a brain tumor. Um, my mom survived for 2 years with this brain tumor. She did go into remission, and then it came back, continued growing. I guess it was never fully gone. And we came to, once I had moved to the States, me and the other two sisters that were here in the States, we were in a commune in Baltimore. We decided that we wanted to go visit mom. And so we road tripped from Baltimore to Minnesota, and we visited with mom for, I think it was about a week. And then we went back home. And the oldest of the three of us chose to stay behind and help grandma take care of mom. So she was with mom for, I want to say, about a year, give or take. And yeah, she got a job and she was working. I know that my dad came to rescue the sister from the bad influences of the outside world. Um, anyways, 2 years after she had come, she wasn't doing the best, and our commune was closing. And me and my other remaining sister, we were each given $100 and told to find a place to live. You had to, at this point in communes, you used to get moved around just place to place, wherever they told you or sent you. But they had a charter come out. I'll talk about that later. But in the mid 90s, they kind of shifted that, and you basically had to like request a transfer. And instead of, that could take a while. So we decided we would just use that $100 to go visit our mom. And then we'd decide where we were going to transfer to from there. So we figured out how to get to Minnesota on $100. And the day we arrived was the last day that my mom got out of bed. She had a hospital bed that was there at the home, and she was being treated at home. And grandma had set up this nice room that was just full of plants and a lot of light. It was a really beautiful room. My grandma really has a green thumb. So there was a lot of really beautiful plants and light, and that was where my mom would sleep. And it was very near the restroom. And yeah, the day we arrived was earlier in that day. Mom had been out of bed, but after that, she was unable to leave the bed. And I remember when we came to say hi, mom started crying, and she looked at grandma and she said, I know them, and I know that they're important, but I can't remember who they are. I was 16, and to hear your mom say she doesn't remember who you are is a very difficult thing to hear. Um, I hadn't lived with my mom since I was 14, and before that, I spent almost 3 years not living with her from the ages of 9 to 12. We were close, but also not as close as we could have been. It's just kind of what it's like growing up in the cult. They do separate families a lot, so you don't have that same sort of bond that you typically would. And, anyways, for that week, we spent as much time as we could with mom. And a week to the day from us arriving was the day mom died. Um, it was in July, July 26th of 96. So I was 16. Mom was a few months shy from turning 43, so she was 42 at the time. This year I will be turning 42, the age my mom was when she died. I have believed solidly that I will die the same age my mom was. I think that's a common occurrence for, especially when you lose someone very close to you, especially a parent at a young age. Apparently, other siblings of mine have had the same thought exactly. And so far, everyone has lived past the age of 42, every one of us, and it's just my turn now. Anyways, that moment I remember waking up. I went downstairs, and there was this very weird, solemn vibe in the house. Um, Mom was struggling to breathe. Over the course of time, people started showing up. My sister had a work friend that came by and stayed. Um, Grandpa came over. Um, my aunts and uncles came over. Random family just started coming by and staying. Mom was breathing very rapidly. It sounded like someone running a marathon, like a pant like that, and then she would suddenly stop for a long period of time, and then she would gasp for air, and then the panting would continue. Um, I sat next to her and held her hand. I don't really remember saying a whole lot more to her other than I loved her. Um, but I sat and held her hand. Um, and everyone reacts to death very differently. It's a really hard thing to experience. And for Mom's family, for the relatives, she had gone away for many, many years, and they had minimal contact with her over those years that she was gone because it wasn't advised to be close with your family unless they were members of the cult, and even then, it just wasn't encouraged. And Mom really cared about her family. She was very close to her family. And I'm glad that she got those couple of years to spend with them because I know she missed them. There was a lot of resentment in the air um, toward the cult, understandably. However, in that moment, I believe me and my other two sisters represented the cult to everyone present, or most everyone, maybe not everyone. Um, I was 16, my older sister was 19, and the other sister, I believe, was 20. So we were still all quite young. And um, my understanding is my mom was a donor, organ donor. However, her body was slowly shutting down one organ at a time. It couldn't have been a wonderful feeling for your body to just start slowly fading from you. She hadn't spoken that day. Um, People took turns saying their goodbyes, telling her it would be okay. I remember when Grandma leaned in and very quietly, Grandma was freaking out quite a bit. Her daughter was dying. Um, she was very resentful to the cult. Again, I understand that. Um, Again, people react very out of character when they're in the throes of grief. And there was some very unpleasant things that were said, specifically that we killed our mother. One of us we better get good insurance because one of us will die from cancer someday, just like our mom. Um, you know, to get a little insight into some of the things that were said. I understand anger is a natural response to grief, um, but things like that can be very hurtful and very traumatic. I do remember after one time when Mom caught a big, deep breath. Grandma leaned in and she told her it was okay. It was okay for her to leave the world. She had fought long enough and the pain was a lot and she could go. And we loved her and we would be okay. And after that, Mom took one final big breath and then it just stopped. The whole room was silent. And I kept waiting for that big gasp again, and it never came. And I held her hand. My mom, because of the medication she was on, had put on a lot of weight due to the steroids that helped reduce the swelling in her brain. Her skin was very sensitive and would bruise at very slight touches. And I sat there after she took her last breath for what felt like a really long time, holding her hand. And when I finally let go of her hand, there was an imprint where my fingers had been. And with every imprint, there was a bruise. And I felt like in her final moments, I had hurt her. And I'll never get that image out of my head. We were raised in the cult to not show our feelings. We were supposed to celebrate death because it meant that you were home with Jesus in the sky. I didn't cry. After a while, I let go of her hand. I looked at those bruises and I went upstairs. And I had my first mixtape that I had made of naughty outsider music. And the first song on the first side of the tape was One Sweet Day by Mariah Carey and Boyz II Men. And I played that song over and over. I played it, I rewound it, and played it again. It felt like at least an hour. And I didn't cry. We went to her funeral. Mom was cremated, and a gal whose voice she really liked sang, I'm forgetting the funeral song that everyone sings. I forget the name. Why am I forgetting the name? I'm an idiot. Okay, I can't think of it. You know the one. It's the song they always sing. And anyways, it's a very sweet song, and I didn't cry. Everyone was giving their condolences. The thing that bothered me the most was everyone coming up to me and telling me, I know how you feel. I'm going to say this real quick. You may have gone through a loss. I've gone through several. No one knows how you feel. My own sisters that were there and experienced the same loss of a daughter to their mother, they don't know how I felt. I'm not sure I knew how I felt at that time. No one knows exactly what you are going through. Some people relate, some people can understand, but no one knows. You don't know. I don't know, for some reason that comment just really bothered me, and I just bit my tongue and just said, oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. That's the story of my mom dying. We always like to look for some kind of silver lining. The way the cult mistreated her throughout the time she was there, and throughout her illness and her death, the fucking Karen Zerbe, who is the one who runs the cult now that Berg is dead, got a prophecy from our mother on the other side, and she had repented for her shortcomings of not trusting in God, and that's why God punished her and took her, but she has apologized for her wrongness and whatever. It was full of shit. It was full of shit. Also encouraging us daughters to be good, wonderful daughters and stay with the cult. That was not okay. It was gross to use her death to try to manipulate her daughters. That was gross. That was disgusting. I will say her death was definitely, it opened a doorway for us to start seeing for real some of the shit in the cult with the way they treated her, both before she knew she was ill, after they knew she was ill, and after she chose to get treatment, and then after she died. They treated her so wrong. Why she chose to join and then to stay and raise So many children in that environment. I will never understand. I do understand that after having multiple kids and having your husband separated from you because they needed him to do other stuff, their separation was not their choice. It was leadership that separated them. Being on your own, then raising all these kids that they forced you to pop out. Now, how would she travel and remove all her children from Brazil? How would she come up with money like that? I think it was a way to enslave people, especially the women. Um, but that's another story. My mom wasn't a perfect person, and she definitely made some decisions that weren't the best. But she was my mom, and she loved me, and she loved my sisters, and she loved a lot of other people too. Um, I'm sure some people have stories of some things that she did that were not okay. I think we all have stories like that. And definitely, if you chose to join a cult and raise your children in it, you probably maybe have a few that aren't great and aren't very flattering and aren't the way that you'd want to be remembered. But one thing I do know about my mom is she had a big heart. And when she could, she did try to look out for not just me and my sisters, but for other children too. She really had a mother's heart and had just a lot of kindness in her. Doesn't mean she didn't have the bad side too, but overwhelmingly, she was a pretty amazing person. And I consider her a tragedy of the cult. I consider her a victim of the cult. I consider her early death to have been something that she at least could have lived probably a few more years had she got medical treatment like she should have. My mom's organs were not able to be donated, but her eyes were. When I was young, I thought people were actually walking around with mom's beautiful eyes. I found out later we did get two thank you notes from two people who were able to get their vision back, or improved. Um, I'm unclear on that, but we got two thank you notes from the recipients. And for a long time, I thought two people each had one of mom's eyeballs. I did not know. um, but that was really wonderful to see. However, her other organs were unable to be used, but her brain was donated to science. And now, 25 years later, I have a few people I know who have had brain cancer and are surviving, and it's been well over a decade for one of my friends. And I'd like to think that mom's donation to science and the medical field maybe is a reason that they understand brain cancer better. Yeah, so organ donation, a great thing. So yeah, not really sure where else to go with this. Um, my heart's been racing quite a bit from this, and so I think I'll call this a video. Thanks for watching. Do the subscribey thingies. I think I already said that, so ignore me. Um, yeah.